My friends think I don't do anything interesting. So to prove them right, I decided to learn a little bit of coding. Which is why over the past 4 weeks, I've been trying to learn Python. So I'd just like to start off by saying that this isn't a guide or a tutorial of any sort. This is just what I did over the past 4 weeks, and I'm not saying this is the best way to learn Python, which if it isn't, do let me know in the comments below so that I can learn better. Now the first step to learning anything programming related is to create a Stack Overflow account. So you can copy code from there and pretend it's yours. Next up, I needed to choose an IDE. IDE stands for Integrated Development Environment, and it basically refers to the program you use to, well, program. The standard IDE that comes with Python is the Python IDLE, but it has a major issue. It's crap. So I'll be using PyCharm, which comes with many cool features, such as giving the user the false impression that they know how to code. Now when I first started off, I had some basic knowledge about sequential, conditional, and iterative statements, some basic data types, operators, and syntax, so I could create a triangle out of stars, or reverse a number, or create other tiny programs to impress a 6-year-old. With this existing knowledge, I spent the first 3 to 4 days doing Euler projects. Project Euler is a series of mathematical problems intended to be solved using computer programs. I did around 30 of these with minimal help from the internet. Eventually, I started realizing that most of these programs were very math intensive, so they were great to practice mathematics, but I wasn't necessarily learning a lot of new things in programming. So I stopped doing these problems and started reading. I figured it was necessary for me to read just to gain a level of base knowledge before I started working on my own little projects. I mostly read a lot of the documentation provided on the Python website itself, although I did read a few articles and tutorials from other sources too. I regularly practiced the concepts that I read about. I learned about functions, modules, methods, and a lot more. I'll leave a link in the description below so you can give it a read yourself. So by the 3rd week, I'd done a few of those Euler projects I talked of earlier and read a lot of stuff on the internet. So I thought it'd be a good time to create little programs of my own. I started off with text-based programs. I created a program that would generate a random number between 0 and 100, and the user would get 10 chances to guess the number, with a hint before every guess. I used the random module for this program. Again, using the random module, I created a program where the user has to guess the name of a random movie 1 letter at a time. For every wrong guess, the user loses a life, and eventually loses the game when 0 lives are left. So it's a bit like Hangman, except, without the hangman. Now the logical thing to do at this stage would be to learn something like object-oriented programming. But since I am a teenage beginner coder, I skipped straight to trying to make graphical user interfaces. So I started with the Pygame module, which in case you're not the sharpest tool in the shed, can be used to create games. I started off with making programs in which you can move a rectangle across the screen, or where you have to make 2 rectangles meet. Similar to these programs, I made a game that many of us are familiar with, the snake game. I had to create a code where the snake got longer every time it came in contact with the target rectangle. The user needs to hit any arrow key once and the snake starts indefinitely moving in that direction. When the snake hits the edge of the window, it emerges from the opposite edge. There's also a nice little score display at the corner. Finally, the player loses the game if the snake touches its own body. I also explored the tkinter module a little. tkinter is a built-in Python module that can be used to create graphical user interfaces. I made a few programs just to understand how the module works, and then I started converting some of my previously made text-based programs into GUIs. First, I turned my number guessing game into a GUI. If you ignore the fact that this program deeply resembles a 7th grade HTML project, it works quite well. You enter a guess, if it's wrong, you lose a life, and get a hint until you lose all your lives and lose the game. If your guess is right, you win. I also turned my Hangman program into a graphical version, and this time, it actually had a hangman. I used my expert graphic designing skills to create a nice little stick figure. Unlike my previous program, this time I didn't want to go with something as basic as a solid color teal background, so I went with a solid color yellow background. Again, you have to guess the name of the movie one letter at a time, until you guess all the letters, or lose all your chances. And yeah, that's about all I've learned over the course of 1 month. In the future, I plan on learning concepts such as object-oriented programming. I guess the initial idea was that I'd become a master coder and get a few job offers from Google, Facebook, and Amazon. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened yet. Anyway, if you have some recommendations about what I should learn now, let me know. I'm very inexperienced and any advice would be helpful.